We invite you, the public, to send us your questions via direct message on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok to Jamaica Debates. We now ask Dion Jackson-Miller to start this segment with a question for Mr. Mark Golding.
Going back to the income tax proposal, Mr. Golding, because several people have been taking issue with your numbers. The PNP's assertion that it can fund the proposal through projected revenue growth doesn't seem to take into, as well as organic revenue growth, doesn't seem to take into account increase in expenditure. That's also projected, as well as low growth rates that no government in recent years has managed to overcome. Isn't it true that your numbers just don't add up?
The fiscal policy paper does project over the next 3 years some $160 billion of additional revenue. The degree to which there are accompanying expenses will depend on how we manage the expense side of the budget. There's also the fact that there are $360 billion of programs in the budget that represent the priorities of a given government at a particular point in time. When we are elected, we're not going to be elected to maintain the current trajectory that Jamaica is on. People want to see change. And most fundamentally, the issue really is the fact that we are coming to the end of the period of austerity, the period where Jamaica has been for 13 and a half years, steadfastly paying down debt. So that the debt to GDP ratio, which we inherited at 147% of GDP at the beginning of 2012, is now, in this fiscal year, projected to achieve the target of 60% of GDP. Once that happens, we no longer have to reduce debt as a priority. We just have to maintain that debt profile. That will release resources of 2.5% to 3% of GDP, which is close to $90 billion of additional resources, which no longer have to be part of your primary surplus target. So we will be able to fund our program quite comfortably come April next year, when the fiscal year starts.
Dr. Holness,
there is a song which says, when the rum tells you you're a big dancer. I don't know what the leader of the opposition was drinking. Firstly, the debt to GDP for this fiscal year is not projected to be 60%. It is projected to be 65% thereabouts. If the leader of the opposition is depending on growth to provide the revenues for $75 billion of expenditure, the country would have to grow between 8 and 10%, which has not done that since the 60s. Thirdly, yes, there are $300 billion of programs. What are these programs? Pharmaceuticals.
Thank you, Dr. Holness. Thank you, Dr. Holness. Our next question is from Giovanni Dennis, and it goes to Dr. Holness.
Dr. Holness, you said on February 7, 2016 in Sam Sharp Square, Montego Bay, within our first 100 days in government, we will start the legislative process to fix the general election date in Jamaica. It's been 3,490 days since. In your May 2016 budget debate, you further stated, the country should not be distracted by protracted periods of uncertainty. Yet, that's exactly what happened with this year's election. After 2 consecutive terms in office, you have failed to deliver on this promise. Why?
Your research into this matter, I respect the question, is incomplete. At the calling of the 2020 general elections, I explained to the public in Parliament that our government actually started work on fixed election date, and we found that it was inconsistent with our constitutional arrangements. And therefore, we did not include it in our 2020 manifesto. It is no longer a part of our platform. More to that, however, is the fact that in seeking to have all of these previous considerations included, we went about putting in place a constitutional reform commission that would bring all the considerations for constitutional reform under an expert review. That expert review was thwarted by the opposition. So, yes, these considerations were considered from 2016, but the reality of our constitutional arrangement made us take a different route, which is to go to a comprehensive constitutional reform, which was frustrated by the opposition.
Over to Mr. Golding to respond.
Just before I respond, just to point out that Mr. Holness's data is not current. The Fiscal Commissioner issued a release, I think it was today actually, indicating that with the National System of Accounts being updated, GDP has been adjusted, and we're now at 62% of GDP. That's what the debt is at the end of March this year, and we will more than likely achieve 60% this fiscal year. No, please, you're not entitled to do that. The flip-flopping from the Prime Minister is manifest. They were supposed to have impeachment. There's no impeachment. Fixed election day, no fixed election day. Ring fencing the NHT, they have taken over $130 billion out of the NHT. Cannot be trusted.
Just reminding that there is a format to the debate and asking the debaters to respect the format to which they have agreed. It's now time to go to the next question, social media. Amoy Harriet, over to you.
This question comes from Janine. Parliament has passed a constitutional amendment bill and a referendum bill to transition Jamaica into a republic. Could you clarify the economic and administrative implications of this transition and how you intend to ensure that the process doesn't distract from Jamaica's economic priorities like debt reduction, investment diversification, and public services?
That question goes to Mr. Golding first and then to Dr. Holness.
In answer to the question, we can whistle and ride. So we have done very well as a nation in reducing our public debt. We ensured that the fiscal rules were very strong with an algorithm, an equation in the fifth schedule to the Financial Administration Audit Act that determines the fiscal balance that must be hit by each year's budget, and that has ensured that successive governments have stayed on course to take it down to 60%. We can do constitutional reform, but it requires authentic consultation with the people, and there must be an effort to have bipartisan consensus on critical issues. And we have not been able to achieve that consensus yet on the critical issue of decolonization, in particular our final court, which is now the Privy Council, the King's Court, that makes orders in the name of the King, as opposed to the regional court, which has been established, the Caribbean Court of Justice, which Jamaica helped to design, helped to fund, and which has developed over the last 20 years a reputation for independence and excellence. There are aspects of the bills that are in Parliament now that we have big problems with. In particular, the fact that effectively it will allow the Prime Minister to appoint the President, because a simple majority of both houses will do it if we do not agree who that person is. I think that is wrong. I think that the President of the country must command the trust and confidence of both sides of the political aisle, and indeed the wider public.
Dr. Holness?
To be clear, the bills before Parliament do not give the Prime Minister the ability to appoint the President. We are the party that have advanced the greatest, the process of repatriating our sovereignty. I am a Jamaican through and through, and I want to see my country's sovereignty represented by a Jamaican. It puzzles me as to why the opposition is trying to frustrate this. The opposition says we must always consult the people, yet they do not want to consult the people on a fundamental architecture of our society, our final court of appeal. They are inconsistent, they are hypocritical, flip-floppers. They were the ones who nudged, encouraged, and agreed with the government that a process should be started for the repatriation of our sovereignty. Midway the process, they have turned around to say they have challenges with it. What is it that they really want? Are you truly a Jamaican?
It's time for our next question. It is from Dion Jax Miller, and it goes to Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, the PNP is promising a tax break for small businesses for the first 3 years of formally incorporating, as well as a raft of other targeted tax relief measures. How do you respond to criticisms that your tax plan reintroduces inefficiencies, tax avoidance, and corruption into the tax system that have been eliminated over the past 15 years?
First of all, I think the Prime Minister repeated innuendo or direct attack which has been leveled by his party on my nationality. And, you know, I just wanted to just make it absolutely clear that I am indeed born here as a Jamaican. Here is my birth certificate, and it shows I was born at the University Hospital on July 19th, 1965, and it's right here. I hope your camera can pick it up. And I have a copy for you, Prime Minister, right here. And I wish you could provide me with a copy of your certification, but of course you can't do so. Now, on the question of tax, there's a third schedule to the GCT Act now, which has a long list of items which are not subject to GCT that are exempt. We feel that laptops and other devices are critical tools of trade, and it is wrong to tax them, and we are going to add them to that list. And similarly, sports equipment, which is vital for social cohesion. Sports is a critical part of keeping young people away from straying down the wrong path and so on. Why are we taxing those items? That cost of living is already high. So I don't agree. The system we have already caters for items which should not be taxed. And we're simply saying we want to adjust those items to include things that should be there but are not yet there.
Dr. Holness?
The Jamaica Labour Party is the only political organization to have reduced taxes. We reduced the GCT from 16.5% to 15%. And we have done so in a way that has not compromised our revenues or the sustainability of future programs. All, and I repeat, all the tax suggestions and promises of the opposition will compromise our fiscal arrangements and place us back in debt or result in increased taxes. The best way to provide social services is to identify the persons who need it.
Thank you, Dr. Holness. Our next question is from Giovanni Dennis, and it goes to Dr. Holness.
The Rio Cobre is a major water source for the St. Catherine Plains and communities in and around Spanish Town. Yet, since 2019, under your watch as Environment Minister, there have been close to a dozen chemical spills, causing fish kills and disrupting lives. You say you're a champion of the environment. Why hasn't there been tougher sanctions for the repeated breaches of environmental permits by the companies culpable?
The Jamaica Labour Party has put in very tough sanctions, including the requirement for the provision of bonds. We are the only government to have called these bonds and brought polluters to court. We have also started the process of studying the Rio Cobre to ensure that there is no discharge into the Rio Cobre. And this is something that I am personally very serious about, and we will put in legislation to end discharge into the Rio Cobre. It becomes even more important as we have now put in place the Content Rio Cobre water project, for which we are pulling 15 million gallons of water from the Rio Cobre per day. So we must protect that asset, and I give the public my sincere commitment that we will protect the Rio Cobre.
Mr. Golding?
Quickly, just to say that the JLP is not the only party to have reduced taxes. The PNP reduced the personal income tax rate from 33.33% to 25%. We reduced the GCT rate from 17.5% to 16%. There's been reductions of taxes on both sides. They plan to reduce, they say, income tax from 25 to 15, which is going to help the rich and the ministers who pay themselves 200+ % pay increases. On the environmental issue, you are the one who overturned NEPA's decision not to grant a permit for the mining of the Dry Harbour Mountains, which is a very sensitive nature reserve. You're flip-flopping again, Andrew.
Our next question is from social media. Over to Amoy Harriot.
Well, Archie, Delanore says many Jamaicans would like to see the full rollout of body-worn cameras on our police officers, even more so now, given the increase in fatal police shootings. Will this be something that you'll prioritize should you be elected?
Mr. Golding will respond first.
First of all, I think it's very important to acknowledge and commend the excellent work done by the police force over the last year and a half in bringing the rate of violent crime, in particular murders in the country, down from the intolerable levels where it had been under this government. More murders committed in Andrew Holness's 2 years in office than any other 2-year term in the history of Jamaica. The police have finally abandoned the failed policies that we did our best to stop, the mass use of states of emergency, which the court has ruled as unconstitutional, and have gone now to a much more targeted approach, a much more strategically sound approach. Having said that, we do feel that it's very important that the public as a whole must have trust and confidence in the police, because the police rely on intelligence and information from the public. And therefore, if the public feel that there's excessive use of force and there's no accountability for it, they're not going to be as cooperative as we need them to be. I think, therefore, it's in the interests of the Jamaican society and the police themselves to have the benefit of body-worn cameras, especially when they go on special operations, so there can be no question, nobody can accuse them wrongly of having used excessive force when the force was legitimate as used. And to the extent that there may occasionally be an excessive use of force, the persons are held accountable for that in accordance with the law. That's what the rule of law requires.
Dr. Holness?
The government is already in the process of procuring and acquiring body-worn cameras. Several thousands of them are under procurement and will be deployed shortly to the police force. We consider this as absolutely important in giving confidence to the public regarding the actions of the police force. And the police themselves want to have these cameras as protection for themselves. Interestingly, however, the leader of the opposition states that the states of public emergency did not work. Now, murders under the PNP increased to over 1,000 murders in 1997 and remained there for over 30 years. It is the Jamaica Labour Party in 3 consecutive years that have reduced murders by 55%. The states of public emergency worked. The states of public emergency were supported by the PNP when Peter Phillips was the leader of the opposition, and it reduced murders by 27%. Since we did not have the cooperation of the opposition, murders went up. A question must be asked: who is responsible for the increase in murders when there was a tool that could have saved lives? It is a serious question.
Now, Giovanni Dennis has indicated that he would like to ask one of his 2 follow-up questions. I believe that question will go to
Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding.
Mr. Golding, I want to go back to the matter of your dual citizenship. It took days for you to confirm that you held dual citizenship and weeks for you to renounce it. Why didn't you acknowledge the issue up front, and why should Jamaicans believe you will be forthcoming with them on any issue, even if it's uncomfortable in the first instance?
I didn't hesitate to acknowledge dual citizenship. I was born in Jamaica. I had a British father, and I inherited British citizenship by descent from him. And that's lawful under the laws of Jamaica, and indeed parliamentarians in Jamaica are permitted to be dual nationals. I therefore didn't consider it to be something which was problematic. However, when it was raised last year and politicized, I decided I want to know what the Jamaican people felt about it, because I thought really my response ought to be driven by them. We did an internal poll. It showed that a majority thought I should renounce, and so I did. And I renounced my British citizenship in August last year.
Dr. Holness, rebuttal.
You know, this is a strange one. A man who wants to represent his country must choose his country. He doesn't need to ask anyone. You should choose. And that's why we say we choose Jamaica. It is indeed of concern that it was not until your 40s when you were becoming a minister of government that you sought to have a Jamaican passport. It is not your birth that makes you Jamaican. It is the choices you make for your country, including supporting a process that would make a Jamaican head of state here, including getting a Jamaican passport.
Our next question is from social media. Over to Amoy, and that question will go to Mr. Golding.
On TikTok, Taj says, given the current negotiations surrounding the U.S. Keep Call Centers in America Act and its potential to impact over 50,000 Jamaican BPO workers, how does your administration plan to safeguard both employment and livelihoods for young Jamaicans if outsourcing opportunities decline?
That's a good question, and the truth is that the evolution of technology, especially the advent of artificial intelligence, is also a threat to the type of services that are provided through outsourcing. So we are going to have to ensure that we try and upskill our existing workforce so that they can be trained to do the type of tasks that technology isn't going to be as adept at dealing with as human beings. And we also have to provide other avenues for employment for young people. That's why we're going to establish the Youth Innovation Fund, which will provide grants and loans to young people to get them into business if they want to get into business. And it will enable them to pursue their talents in tech or in creative industries or any other area of endeavor so that they can express themselves, help to monetize their talent, and build brand Jamaica. And so those are the types of things that need to be done. We also want to emphasize training and the role of the private sector in training. We'll be giving an incentive, a dollar-for-dollar matching of all businesses who invest in upskilling and training. We will match their investment through the HEART program to encourage them to invest further in training and upskilling the workforce so they can employ more people in higher-paying jobs. Right now, too many of our people are struggling in low-income jobs, low-wage jobs, low-tech jobs.
The same question goes to Dr. Holness.
Well, let me give you some practical and real answers instead of airy-fairy stuff. Jamaica is already positioning itself for nearshoring and friendly shoring of the recalibration of the global supply chain. And that is why we have made a massive investment in the Caymanas development and in Raintree. These are real investments that will bring production to Jamaica and jobs to Jamaica. We have already started to ensure that over 120,000 Jamaican youths can access training free of cost under HEART. And much of that training is in support of not just BPO, but logistics. But more than that, we saw the change in technology coming and the impact it will have. And that is why we have invested in a coding and technology academy, the Amber Heart Academy, where hundreds of Jamaican youth are trained in not just the basics, but as high up as data science. Because what we want to create in our society are the trained skills that can attract the jobs that we are already negotiating for. You have a government that understands the changing global dynamics.
Thank you, Dr.
and putting
Holness.
in place measures to take advantage of it.
We will now take a short break, and we invite you to stay tuned.